Thank you for joining and rejoining us, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you've had a good morning. So I'd like to first off thank our sponsors who made today possible, and I'd like to introduce the next session, which will be looking at fibrenomics, the economics of connectivity throughout the region. We've got a stunning lineup for you, so I want to hand over to our moderator for the session, Madonna Park.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And thank you to our very esteemed group of panelists for joining us. We actually have quite a diverse group here this morning, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion around what is happening in the fiber industry around Asia. But maybe we can start off with a round of introductions, and it would be great, as I said, we have a fairly diverse group here, and it would be great if you guys could also give a little bit of a description of your businesses and what you do, because I think there is a wide range here. So maybe we can start here with Ivan.
Sounds good. Good morning. Yes, I'm the odd one out because I work for Blue Wireless, which is a wireless network service provider, which is a relatively new thing in the industry. But we serve global enterprise customers with wireless access, so wireless connectivity for their global WANs, and based in Singapore here. And as a company, we operate in several locations around the world, offering customers access in about 80 countries now. But yeah, Singapore is the home, and happy to participate in the discussion.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Masato Hoshino. I look after the APAC business for Colt Technology Services. Some of you may know, many of you are using our lanyards, but we provide digital infrastructure services across the globe. One of the key differentiators for Colt is that we have fiber assets in roughly about 50 plus metro cities around the world, and which allows us to provide our high bandwidth capabilities to a lot of our customers.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Hendrik Kwong. I'm the chairman and executive director of PFOCN, also known as Philippine Fiber Cable Network. Yeah. You got it. Yeah. Anyways, as chairman, oversees the strategic positioning and also, the master planning on a yearly basis, and also, as executive director, I take care of the public relations and marketing and legals and compliance. So, PFOCN is a company based in the Philippines. We primarily, we're primarily in the investment, construction and maintenance and operation of passive fiber infrastructure in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Clement Goh. I'm the CEO for Zenith IG, or Zenith Infrastructure Group. We own, operate and manage dense dark fiber infrastructure across the many metros in Asia Pacific. Singapore is the headquarters. We now currently operate in Singapore, Hong Kong, Melbourne, and Sydney, and we're looking to expand into various other metro in Southeast Asia. Predominantly our business is to connect between data centers, hyperscalers, as well as the cable landing station. My experience in the last 18 years has been operating as a data center operator. I worked for Equinix and STT GDC until very recently. And this company is new. We started in April of 2022, funded equally by Digital Bridge and Colombo Capital. And we saw that there's a need for this service to connect between all the data centers, as more hyperscalers are asking for high capacity and highly secured dark fiber infrastructure.
Great, thank you, everybody. So, obviously the last couple of years has been sort of unprecedented worldwide, right? So we've gone through a global pandemic, we've had regional conflicts, now we have macroeconomic volatility, and supply chain disruptions, all of that. How is this impacting your business? And I think, you guys all gave a little bit of a description, but if you dig a little bit more, some of your sort of target customer bases tend to be fairly different. I think, Clement, you have a fairly narrow set of customers that you're targeting. And Hendrik, you said you're more passive, so you're selling on more of a wholesale basis, whereas I think you guys are probably more enterprise focused and have a much broader customer base. It'd be interesting to hear from each of you, the sort of the demand trends from those customers, because I think hyperscalers may be different than an enterprise customer base. So if you guys can talk about sort of, what those growth drivers from your customers are looking like. Has there been any change in sort of decision-making timeline or churn trends, things like that? That would be great. So maybe you want to start?
Sure, happy to start. Yeah, I think what the last few years have taught us that flexibility, diversity is the key thing for customers. There's not one single network or one single technology that caters to all, right? So, and I think in our segment, in the enterprise segment, yes, we have seen the need for flexibility. Even in sectors where you wouldn't expect it, such as retail, which has suffered quite a bit in the last few years through the COVID stage. But the whole idea is things are changing, right? And again, in our segment, in using wireless technology, it was so much easier to get connected using wireless solutions compared to traditional fiber line. So that's one thing that stood out for us. The demand has definitely not come down. The demand has gone up, but the needs are more towards flexibility for our type of customers. So less about price, less about speed, those type of things. It was more like, hey, how flexible, how fast can we change things around?
And do you think that will persist? Not so much about speed and price, post, as the world stabilizes.
Speed and price, always important, right? It's never going to go away. And of course, major things like quality, that's not going to go away, right? Those are table stakes. But I think the differentiating factor for any service provider at this point is the flexibility to cater to different customers and to adjust yourself to their specific needs.
Okay, great. Masato?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the flexibility aspect of it. In the last 3 years through the pandemic, I think in 2020, we saw the enterprise market really kind of shut down and kind of see what's going to happen. Obviously IP capabilities was very big because of the remote working, everybody going remote, whatnot. But in the last year or so, we've started to see a lot of business pick up with a lot of projects starting to kick back up again. Digital transformation is driving a lot of this cloudification, moving to the cloud is driving a lot of the demand for the enterprises. And again, the flexibility to be able to access the network in any way possible, whatever the access methods may be, are key factors in decision-making for networks for the enterprise.
Thank you.
I think, for the past 3 years, there are pros and cons brought about by the pandemic. Speaking of pros, I think, everybody was locked down and locked in the homes, so that the demand for capacity, bandwidth, increased exponentially. So, that's indirectly helping my business, in a way. But, at the same time, the biggest challenge or the biggest cons that brought by the pandemic would be, logistics and, havoc in the sourcing of materials to build the network, getting the labors, to actually roll out the network. Those are the challenges that, that were brought by the pandemic that you used to, didn't have these kind of problems or less of the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I echo all the views from my colleagues in the panel. If you look at the adoption of digital transformation and cloud services, that created a lot of demand for the services from the hyperscalers. And we see across the region that they're building a lot more new sites, new data centers. And, and obviously with the demand, connectivity requirement has gone up, bandwidth has gone up. And a lot of them are looking at, well, now we have gone up by 10-fold, 100-fold. How do I reduce my costs? And one of the ways they are re-looking at re-architecting their infrastructure is we see them moving from lit services or managed network services to procuring dark fiber directly and lighting it up themselves. It is more cost effective, it lowers their costs. At the same time, because of all these new sites, they are also looking for new diversity and new build. They are in location where it's underserved, sometimes in far-flung, the industrial areas. And during the pandemic, there were a lot of construction restriction, which means that now there's this pent-up demand, which it's timely that now a lot of the metros are opening up. We are starting to do a lot more construction and providing diversity to the existing network that's on the ground.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And, also, you guys, not only some of you target different segments, but operate in different regions. Ivan and Masato, you guys are, Ivan, I think you're the most global of our panelists, and Masato, Colt is very, it's pan-Asian as well as pan-European. What do you guys view as sort of the most attractive growth markets in the, for the next 5 years?
Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I have the APAC business, but definitely, especially in our global business, Asia is definitely the growing market, right? We continue to look at different markets within the region to see where the growth is and expand. But obviously for Colt in this region, Japan is our biggest market, and because of the fact that we focus on selling a lot of metro capabilities, we are continuing to expand our capabilities even within Japan.
Okay, and in other markets that you think are going to be the most fast growing in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, Southeast Asia as a whole, obviously we have capabilities in Singapore and Hong Kong, but even in North Asia and Korea, we are expanding our capabilities, but Southeast Asia is a focus for us.
Okay.
Yeah, for us, I mean, starting in Singapore and Asia was, of course, the first region where we expanded our services. I think what we've seen is that also the adoption of wireless, in Asia has been much faster. It is already a mobile-first economy in that sense. So technology-wise, I think there's a much more tendency of customers to use wireless technology as an alternative. Whereas other regions, Europe is a little bit behind in that sense. The network are not as great as here in Asia. And also I think the mindset of some of the customers is now only catching up.
Catching up to wireless, or do you think?
Absolutely, yes. So now it's, of course, with 5G and everything that's happening now, there is definitely a better awareness and more acceptance of wireless access as it was 2-3 years ago. It's a global phenomenon, but Asia is still I think the area where a lot is happening. Yeah.
And Clement?
Yeah, and for us, basically the markets where there's a lot of new data center being built. If you ask me to kind of look across the whole region, I would say Australia will be big for us. There hasn't been any new network being built in a significant way in the last probably 20 years. So we have a big build going on in Melbourne and Sydney. The other market that we think that there's a lot of potential will be in Southeast Asia, predominantly in Jakarta, where there's a lot of data centers, as we know, and obviously the local incumbent with their older infrastructure would not be able to support some of this new build. So those are the areas that we're looking at.
Yeah. And speaking about sort of pan-Asian, obviously each market is so individual. A lot of different cultural and regulatory barriers. How do you guys find that? And is it make it obviously makes it difficult to go into certain countries versus others? So Clement, you and I were talking about that.
Sure. It is always easier to operate in tier 1 cities, but obviously the challenge is obvious that the price point and competition is low and competition is high, right? There are a couple of challenges across the region, and they're all different. Metro has different nuances. In tier 1 cities like Singapore and Australia, very well regulated. When you want to get permits, you go to a central body, things get done very efficiently, easy to operate. Whereas if you go to, let's say, the emerging market, like let's say Malaysia or Indonesia, then you have to work with various government agency. It takes a longer time. In order to get permit done, it's not as straightforward because you have private land and government roads, right? So that's from a regulatory perspective. And then you have your complexity of construction, because different metro, they have different method of construction. In emerging market, what I just learned in Indonesia is very interesting. They use a method called rojak method, which is they use hand to dig. And then, of course, if you are in Australia, they will have HDD, which is horizontal direct drilling. You can drill longer distance, it's much faster. But then that's provided you know what's under the ground, because you need to, there must be a good database to understand that you're not destroying someone else's asset. Emerging market, not so much, because there's not well documented data. And then, of course, lastly, I think the competitive environment is very different. Some market obviously is more open to foreign investors. As our type of business, we're highly regulated, so a lot of the countries will have foreign ownership restriction. That means that we may not have control over the asset, or we have to find other ways to work around that. That's easier in tier 1 cities and tier 1 market. And the competition will be different. For North Asia, obviously, it's a little bit more difficult. They're very protective of their local telcos. But we never give up. We just have to figure a way out and try to see how to operate in those areas.
Hendrik, what?
Yeah, sure. I think Clement's answer was very comprehensive. I mean, I just want to dive in a little bit more to the Philippines, because that's where I work, So in the Philippines, as Clement said, just like Jakarta or Indonesia, is one of the emerging markets. At a macro, on a macro perspective, actually, I think the Philippines is pretty good. You adopt, say, a U.S. Rule of law system, so that the paperwork somehow complicated, but then once you get it, it's actually quite standard. So that's that. And then the complications comes when there's land disputes between private and governments. So the government says, oh no, this is my right of way, and then this one landowner pops up from out of nowhere. It's like, this is my land. So there we go. Whether it's the government's right of way or it's right of way for this landowner. Those are cases where things could heat up and be contentious. This is the most difficult part of getting permits or getting right of ways particularly in the Philippines. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think three things in regards to the differences in the markets. I think it's really the regulatory bit, like Clementon mentioned, cost and demand, right? So those are the three key things that you need to consider when you're doing investments in assets. Obviously, the regulatory bit, again, depending on the country, like Clement mentioned, investing in the telecom sector is quite different in every different country. I think in terms of the cost, again, construction for doing fiber builds within different cities, like for example, my colleagues in Europe always ask me why I spend so much money in Japan. It's because digging in Japan is 15 times more expensive per meter than it is in, for example, London, right? So, and even in Singapore, it's maybe 5 times the price of what it is in London. But it's definitely a lot more expensive in Japan. But again, you also have to have that density of the demand. And obviously, as I think Clement mentioned earlier on, the hyperscalers, because of the fact that all these enterprises are moving to the cloud and demand on the cloud services, they are funding and they are requiring a lot of these builds that we have in the region.
Not much to add. I mean, it's hard to build, right? I mean, we all know that, but I think that's again the case for wireless, where mixing and matching. Yes, it makes sense for the big locations, but for the smaller locations, wireless is a much cheaper and faster way to go. The surprising thing actually that we found out in the last few years is that even in cities where like Singapore, where fiber is so abundant, actually the wireless take-up has been one of the highest. Because for two reasons. One is, when we talk about 99% coverage on fiber, that's only to the homes, right? There's a lot of industrial areas which are actually underserved. So, if you're familiar with Singapore, there's a lot of islands, Jurong Island, Seberok Island, Bukom Island, all islands that I didn't know that existed, but there's huge business over there. And they don't have a lot of fiber options. Or it's going to take 6 months and tens of thousands of dollars to change something. So we have been able to switch a lot of those customers actually from satellite to wireless, at reducing their cost by 10 and increasing their speed by 10. So it's a double whammy. So it's not just the difficult locations. It's actually even in the developed markets, there's a lot of opportunity to connect more with wireless.
And so, Ivan, are you competing directly with any of these guys, like Colt, for example, for some of these customers? Masato says no.
Not in the. We're competing with broadband, right? Because wireless is currently, in terms of quality level, at a broadband level, so it cannot compete from a speed and quality level with with a gigabit fiber, right, and above, right? So when we're talking about connecting data centers, etc., there's That's absolutely fiber domain. But anything smaller than that, we call it branch and beyond. So a branch is a small office, or anything smaller than that. Wireless is we think a good alternative. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess carrying on a little, beyond the regulatory challenges, obviously more recently, all the supply chain and also inflation. So it's, I'm sure, more expensive to build. And are you guys seeing a lot of delays? And then on the flip side of that, what are the customer expectations, right? So are you able to pass on some of your increased costs to your customers, or do they? How is that looking for each of you?
Maybe I can start with the easy one, because for us it has gotten cheaper and cheaper. I mean, the price, we look at price per gig, right? So then the price per gigabyte of download. And that has come down tremendously on the mobile networks over the last few years. And I don't think the end is in sight yet. So it's easier and cheaper to go wireless. And the last few years, yes, there is inflation and there is shortage, but it hasn't really affected us. So we're lucky. But I know on the building side, it's tough, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been on the luckier side, or maybe it's just good planning, but there has been delays for sure, especially, for example, like on the data center side, there's been definite delays in getting what we need to be able to build capabilities. But I think in terms of fiber, it's affected somewhat, but obviously customer demand, especially when you're, for example, the hyperscalers, they want it, today, right? I mean, or yesterday. So generally speaking, I mean, I think there has been some impact, but for our business, not too much.
And the customers are willing to let you pass on price increase?
Definitely not. I mean, obviously, a lot of the hardware manufacturers have openly and across the board have increased their prices based on their costs. But that's not something that the telcos that I've seen really have the luxury in being able to pass on.
So then that results in compressed margins for you?
Yeah? For sure.
Yeah, I guess, you have to look at it from a lit fiber and dark fiber perspective. From the lit fiber perspective, the prices are always decreasing because you guys, invest so many big capacity equipments so that to generate a lot of capacity, so because of economies of scale, the unit price will definitely drop, over time. But that's why I'm not in that turf, right? That's why I'm not in that game. I stay dark, and in dark fiber, dark fiber assets retain value very well, simply because it's a very simple math. It's you versus your clients. If you can build more efficiently, cheaper, better, affordable, with all those traits and qualities, then you have a competitive edge, and that's how we survive and thrive actually. So I think the price of digging, the price of rolling out fiber infrastructure in any country will increase over time due to inflation, cost of labor, cost of materials, and so on and so forth. And we cannot pass on that cost. But so you need to build early to retain the value, and because if they build later, then they're definitely going to be more expensive than you. So you're basically converting dollars to assets on the ground in a particular country, and then sit on it, and over time you'll have your price competitive edge, and you can see when to strike a deal in terms of maybe sometimes you can increase the price a little bit. That's my experience. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm glad Hendrik touched on that topic, because it's exactly why we chose to stay pure, as in staying with dark fiber. And it's all about economy of scale. So when I introduced the company earlier, I talked about building high density fiber optics. So when we built to connect between data centers and to cable landing station, we will build in advance of demand, right? When you do the trenching, whether you're putting one dart or two or three, the cost differential is not much. So we will look at, if it's a data center, the demand is going to go up. We'll pre-build and we'll overbuild. And during the construction, we'll start the pre-selling effort, very much like a data centers. And with that, you can reduce your cost of, cost per fiber, which will then be more cost effective for the customer when they buy in bulk. And for us, the other thing that we do is we have, because we are constructing in various metros, we are also forecasting our demand for fiber with the fiber optic manufacturer, which allow us to have just-in-time supply. So supply constraint will not be an issue for us.
And maybe Masato, you can respond to that, because Colt, you guys do obviously some dark fiber, but lit fiber is probably more predominant for you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, our main business is based on lit services and managed capabilities, managed service capabilities. So, yeah, I mean, that like Clement said, it is a matter of scale, right? Obviously, if you have a large demand of and segment, your customer segment is really focused on the enterprise, then the economics work in terms of being able to provide the lit service capabilities. But if you're focused really on wholesale or hyperscalers, then obviously they are looking for more dark fiber capabilities.
But like Ethernet speeds are getting faster and faster. Does that help too?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, right? So obviously, if you keep your ARPUs high on whatever you're selling, and the cost to implement a 10 meg circuit versus a 10 gig circuit is pretty much the same, right? I mean, obviously the hardware is a little bit different in the cost, but in terms of getting somebody out there and implementing the circuit, the cost is the same. So obviously, if you want to keep your ARPUs high, so yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think Chris, I'm not sure he mentioned at the beginning that the audience could use Swap Card for questions, but in the meantime, are there any questions from the audience? Nope. Okay. Yes, I guess that's, oh, the Slido, sorry. Sorry, yes.
Richard Ma from National University of Singapore. So actually, I saw there are a couple of questions in the agenda. So one of them says, what are the implications of and opportunities presented by metaverse? So I think this question hasn't been touched
No,
upon.
that's a good one. Very broad.
Thanks.
You guys want to?
Sure, happy to answer. You know, whether we like it or not, it's happening. And it will be wireless. That's my prediction, because I think a lot of the AI, all the personal, you know, the developments and experiences, right, will be very close to the body, to the, you know, to the people that will be using it. And a lot of those devices will be 5G powered, right? So I think that's where most of the traffic is going to go to in that sense. Of course, you know, there's a cell tower, there's massive fiber behind it, and to get to the data centers. So I think there's two sides to it, right? There's the receiving side, those will be, you know, people, and they'll be mostly connecting on 5G. And then there's the supplying side, which is the data centers on fiber. So, you know, best of both worlds.
So I think for the metaverse, you will probably see that there'll be higher bandwidth requirement. It will be latency sensitive because you want to be able to respond back to the user. So from the supply side, between data centers, there will be high bandwidth requirement, which play into our space where we provide dark fiber for them to be able to operate more efficiently.
Just want to add on Clement. Actually, you know, metaverse and us, we're level 1 and then they're level 10. So it's a little far-fetched for us. But the thing is that we welcome all, you know, we'll welcome all players into the industry, because we're basically the road builders. Whatever runs on it, I don't care whether it's train or car or Tesla or whatever it is. You know, Tesla is like your metaverse, you know, in that sense, in that analogy. So I mean, like, as long as there's, you know, users of the road, I'm happy with it. So I think that's gonna help me and Clement in the future, huh?
Yeah, well, the digital highway.
Nothing really more to add. I mean, again, as everyone mentioned, in the back end, obviously, because of the amount of capacity that's going to be required to support the metaverse, obviously, from a data center infrastructure perspective, there will be more needs. But on the user end, again, like Ivan said, it's going to be wireless is key.
Sorry, maybe a little bit follow-up. So you mentioned metaverse mostly from an application side, from a demand side, that's going to drive the demand for the infrastructure. But how about from the technological side? Behind the metaverse, there's this blockchain, smart contract. Although these are also happening at the application layer, but how are those technology might affect and impact the road builders? Okay.
I'm not qualified to answer because we're just giving the roads, you know, like in that sense. So.
Does anybody want to take a stab?
Well, I mean, I think there's all these technologies, right? I mean, whether it be metaverse or, you know, AI or, you know, whatever it is. I mean, all of these things are going to could possibly make our businesses leaner and more efficient in terms of processes and capabilities. And obviously, because of that, we would be able to hopefully pass those savings on to our customers and be able to make our businesses more efficient, right?
I think regardless of the application, what I mean, for us as an infrastructure provider, we looked at, is this going to increase the volume of the usage for the infrastructure? Number one. Number two is there a need for higher speed, which means that, you know, the network must be able to cater for that. So if all these are driving towards that direction, you know, in terms of so-called building the highway, we will build wider highways and we'll build longer highways that allows the traffic to pass through faster. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? Anything else that you guys want to cover or talk about in your business that you'd like to highlight? Clement, we were talking a lot about sort of, your business is very new. It's a startup, right? And I think modeled after a company that we're familiar with in the US, Summit IG, and very focused on catering to the hyperscalers, the data center to data center connectivity. So, obviously in Asia, the hyperscale growth is expected to be the fastest in the world. And so you're trying to capitalize on that trend. And so, where do you see your business? You're obviously in a number of markets right now. How many more markets, do you want to take it to? And are you being taken to new markets ahead of your customers, or because you're expecting the demand, or are your customers taking you to new markets?
Okay, that's a very good question. A little bit of history. If you look at Summit IG that operates out of Virginia, the playbook that we are using is exactly the same as Summit IG. And as you can see from the name, Summit IG, Zenith IG. Summit IG was started by a gentleman by the name of Bill Cook. He started Summit IG, and now he's an advisor to Columbia Capital, as well as chairman of Zenith IG. So hence, that's the heritage, right? We took the playbook from Summit. And Virginia is the data center capital, so to speak. You see over the years, hundreds of data centers being built, whether it's AWS, Microsoft, Google, everyone has a bunch of data centers there. And the need for high capacity dark fiber have driven the growth of Summit IG. In fact, one of the customer has 2.5 million calls just within Virginia itself, connecting just campus connection between their own data centers. And we see that kind of scale happening in Asia. While we are still at a nascent stage, but I think in some of the metros that we are operating in have that potential, especially in some of the larger builds that's going on, and the mature market, like I mentioned earlier, in Australia. And in terms of the customer, because of the relationship that the investor have with the hyperscalers, and because of the relationship Summit have and Bill has with some of these customers, we are getting a lot of direction from them on where they would like to see dark fiber infrastructure being built. They have certain market of choice for us to start looking at investing. I wouldn't say we build in advance. I think what we do is we build based on pipeline projection that was forecasted to us. So in that sense, we're some of the build and that we are doing today, we have so-called anchor customer, which means that we build routes for our customers, but we overbuild on those projects so that part of the infrastructure is dedicated to them, but the others are for us to sell to other customers. But they basically fund the build for us, pretty much like what Summit has done in the early days.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past few years, the fiber world has evolutionized a little bit. Traditionally, fibers predominantly are used by operators, and the operators in any particular country. But there's a recent shift in terms of interest from other ICT participants as well, such as hyperscalers. Traditionally they rely on the operators, but now there's a shift in terms of going passive. So they wanna have the passive assets and then generate capacity that way instead of relying on one or two or three operators domestically. So the fiber business clientele base has increased significantly over the past five years, especially after the pandemic. So, whereas, before there's only operators and one or two big ISPs that will be requiring fiber, now there will be people from hyperscalers, data centers, even governments. They would like to have their own intranet, and they'll just source some fiber network for the internal use. So that's the trend that I see, especially in the Philippines, because that's where I'm the most familiar with. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we have an audience question.
Yes, hi. Yeah, thank you, Madonna. It's Claude Ashkarak, Tel Consulting. Japan, it's okay to ask a question on Japan. Masato, and to you as well, Clem. So basically to an incumbent and possibly a potential challenger one day. I was participating in the construction of fiber networks in Japan 20, 25 years ago. And it's very, very difficult thing. And KVH was one of my clients as well at the time. What is the landscape today for the barrier to entry for potential new company? Maybe you can help Clem a little bit, and in terms of digging up trenches and laying up ducts.
Yeah, I don't think the landscape has changed so much, right? I mean, obviously cost is still expensive in Japan to do fiber construction. I think one of the key differences is really so when we do fiber implementations anywhere in Japan, you are always trying to get as much available duct as possible from any of the authorities or NTT or whoever it is to get as much duct. So we want to limit the amount of civil work that's being actually done within the actual market, right? So that availability has really started to go away, right? So because of the amount of builds that are happening and because the amount of companies that are trying to put fiber in the ground, the amount of duct that's available is eroding, and which is why more civil work needs to be done, so more implementations are going to cost more. I would say that's the key thing, just because, again, there's a lot of fiber capabilities that are being put into the ground today. Many different companies right now. I mean, for example, if you look at the amount of data center companies that are coming into Japan recently, I mean, it's exploding. You look at some hot areas like, for example, Inzai, which is, towards the eastern part of near Narita Airport. There's so many data center companies that are actually building there, and there's fiber being put into the ground all across the board from a lot of different companies.
And for new incumbent like ourselves, we look at market in North Asia. I mean, not just in Japan, but Japan and Korea, pretty much similar situation where the cost of construction is high. Obviously there's a few strong players in those markets. The way we look at it is that the business model will be different for those markets. We will probably have to look at partnering with local partners. Working with either the telco or the tier 2 players to continue to expand the infrastructure. Where places that we can own and build easily, like in Australia, that we will go ahead and do it ourselves. But in those markets, we'll partner.
We only have a couple of minutes left, but maybe just to finish off on the data center theme, Masato, these guys were, obviously talking about connecting, and I saw a stat somewhere that Colt has 1,000 data centers on net between Europe and Asia. That's pretty impressive. And so, how important of part of your business is that? And given the new build hyperscalers all want sort of dark fiber, are you guys also planning to provide that service, or are you continue to provide lit services to those customers?
Yeah, I mean, again, obviously, any network provider wants to concentrate assets on any locations that are data intensive, right? That a lot of data is flowing in. Obviously, data centers are a key part of that business. And hyperscalers, although they might not be buying as much lit services anymore and purchasing more dark fiber assets, Obviously the enterprises that are accessing the cloud are obviously still requiring lit services. So, we continue to, put our assets into any locations that are data intensive. Again, any new data centers, especially, data center campuses like I was mentioning in Japan, in Inzai. Those areas that have many data centers are areas that we want to invest our assets into.
So you guys can coexist. You can service
sure,
the enterprises,
for sure.
they can service the hyperscalers.
For sure.
Perfect. Great. So I think we just have 30 seconds left. So I just wanted to thank our panelists for joining us this morning, and also the audience. Hope you enjoy the conference, and thank you very much for having us all here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madonna, Ivan,